Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about command line and what it is, some of the popular command line tools that are available, what problem does command line solve, and I'm going to briefly talk about the challenge that you can solve for this particular Solin Conde Foundation series. So just like every other tutorial, I want to make it clear that I'm just giving you the bare essentials, and it's up to you to figure out what more do you need to learn to make this particular tool useful for you. So moving right on into what command line is. A little bit of history. When I first started to program, actually, I thought command line was really intimidating. It was like black magic, watching some of my friends just typing away, all these commands that I didn't know into just this black, window, and getting a bunch of text, and they're moving around, not really explaining what they're doing. It all felt really intimidating. But I also thought it was really cool, and I hope that by the end of this you find command line interfaces just as cool as I think it is now. So before I kind of move on to the challenge and talking about it, I wanted to clear up a few terminologies that get thrown around in the industry, right? People maybe often say terminal or console or shell or bash. These all mean slightly different things, but a lot of developers kind of use it interchangeably. So traditionally, a terminal is a place where you just type in the text. A console was actually a physical device like a computer, and a shell is the command line interpreter that's inside that particular console. And what we're going to be using for the Solin Coded projects for now is going to be bash, which is shipped with Apple's terminal command line interface, and we'll also use terminal like I just mentioned. Now, what is bash? As I mentioned previously, bash is a shell, and a shell is essentially just a program that interprets your commands. I'm kind of briefly going over it really quickly, but just try to don't just skip through it. Try to kind of understand these slightly different pieces of the terminology, right? Because that's going to be important for you when you're Googling or trying to figure out more about command line interfaces. So here's bash. It's just a born again shell. That's what it stands for. That's the acronym. And this is Apple's terminal. A few things. This is optional, but there's popular shells out there. So bash is a shell there, but there's other shells out there that's available that does very similar things. So there's like CHS or Zesh. There's Corn shell. There's also Fish. There's also CLI programs like iTerms2, which I personally use. There's one called Hyper, which is kind of a newer one. It's really cool. I think my boss uses that one. But yeah, so what does command line try to solve? What problem does it solve? Historically, back before we had graphical user interfaces, this was the only way for us to interact with computers. We just had a keyboard, so we had to figure out how to move files or create new files, create new folders, talk with the operating system, all through just using your keyboard. Commands. There were commands, right? And there's a lot of different command line interpreters, but mainly there's like a Unix system and there's like a Windows-based system. We won't be covering the Windows-based system today, but for now, will come in the future. But for now, just know that we're going to be learning bash, which is a Unix-based system. So going down to, so the problems that we're solving. Why do we still need command line, even though the graphical user interfaces are so good now, right? You could just right-click on something, move folders. Honestly, all the commands that you're going to be learning, you could do with a mouse and a keyboard. But why even learn it? So number one, not all commands that you will have to use in the future has a GUI interface, right? Especially third-party tools like NPM is a node package manager for web technologies. I don't think there is a graphical user interface to work with that. There might be, but it goes to the second point. Command line is much faster than using a mouse. Once you get used to navigating using the command line, you'll never want to go back, essentially. But don't be ashamed, or don't be afraid to just open a Windows and drag files into it. I do it all the time. It's just whatever happens to be the most effective for me at the time. So, but with that said, command line is very cool, and it will definitely speed up your workflow, and it's definitely a necessary skill for you to learn as a developer. So let's move on to basic commands, and you could read this for yourself, but basically it's navigation related, so changing directory, so cd up, cd to a directory, cd back, printing where you currently are, listing all the files that are in there, making new directories, creating new files, copying, removing, basic things that you do with like traditional file organization, right, with your mouse. One additional thing that I do want to mention is, if you ever are confused about a command, you could type in a command called man for manual. So man, and then type in the command. So you could do it man space cd, enter, and it'll open a manual. But the thing is about that is also it opens the manual is open inside your terminal in an editor called Vim, and I'll go over Vim in another video. But Vim is also a very, very cool tool. It's not necessary anymore. It's just a visual editor, but it's one of those things when, if you learn it very well, it will just make you that much hip, I guess, in the developer community. But I do use it here and there, but it's not my main editor. So moving on to the challenge. The basic challenge, this is like a very simple challenge. If you could do this, I would say like 90% of the commands that you will use, at least in terms of file organization and navigating to projects, this is pretty much it. And everything else you could kind of Google or pick up on the way. And if you really get interested, there's something called bash scripting, where you could create your own custom commands to be able to open up new folders, automate certain processes. Essentially, you could do anything with bash script that you could do with a keyboard and mouse, but the cool thing is you can automate it with commands, right? So briefly kind of talking about the challenge is to navigate to the root terminal. So what is a root? You can look up that. Create a new folder called workspace, and don't delete this workspace directory, because I want to make it so that you could kind of put all your projects into the workspace. That way everything's neat, and you have one way that's close to your root to get to your workspace. You have to change the directory, create a new folder. You can name it anything. I just named it copy me. Create a new file inside, come out of that directory, create a new directory called delete me, go into the delete me, delete the files in there, come out, delete some more files, copy. I think I already discussed copying. So one thing about copying a directory, I made it I added like kind of a little stumble step here. You might have to do a little bit of investigation on try to figuring out how to copy a directory versus just the file. So try to understand that. The hint is -r tag, recursively copy. So try to figure out what that means, but that's pretty much it. It's a very simple workflow that you will use often, and don't be afraid, again, if you learn this, and don't be afraid to just use your mouse if you have to, right? Because in the end, no one really, as cool as command line is, no one really cares that you're a master command line guru, right? No one really cares. What people do care is you getting your job done, you getting your tasks completed in an orderly fashion. And the only reason why I'm teaching you this tool, because I believe that it's crucial for you to learn to be an excellent developer. It's just another tool set that you need to know just enough. But you can, of course, like go really deep into it, and you'll find that really rewarding if you once you go deep into it, because you'll have just a foundational level of understanding that other people might not have, and it will serve you. All of this will serve you in one day. All right, for example, if you work with AWS, which is a cloud infrastructure, basically a lot of the once you get into AWS, you might not have a graphical user interface to work with these remote instances of your server, right? That may be a little too advanced for this particular tutorial, but just go through this challenge, try your best, and I will create a solutions video for this particular challenge instead of creating another branch. But yeah, so I hope you can finish this challenge successfully. I hope you are interested in command line and get really into the nitty-gritty of things coming up soon. Thanks.